This is the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with Nick Cattles.
You are listening to the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with Nick Cattles, part of the CLNS Media Network, and this episode is brought to you by Prizepicks, largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Download the Prizepicks app today. Use code CLNS. Get $50 instantly when you play $5. And you also want to eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/Bedard50off. Use code Bedard50off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. Before we get into the Patriots, Greg, you told me before I hit the record button that you have a couple of Celtics thoughts to get off your chest after game one. So have at it, sir.
So really just like one quick thought. So basically everybody knows, like, I'm not a huge NBA guy. I start tuning in more during the playoffs. And of course, because I know what happened in the 4 regular season games between the Knicks and the Celtics, they're relegated to the smaller TV. I'm watching Maple Leafs Panthers. we're more of a hockey family. And so, in the game, I'm watching it. It's pretty much playing out as I thought. They're up 20 midway through the third. And then, of course, we all know the collapse happened. What I don't understand about this team and about some of the guys on this team, namely Jason Tatum, like I understand the mentality and the 3-point shooting, and I don't have a big problem with their approach overall. But, when you're up 20 in the third quarter, like, in this is on Mazzulla, like, don't you just change tactics where you're just like, all right, we have a lead now. Now we just need to grind it out. We need to go to the hoop. We're happy with 2s now. And that sort of thing. And instead, I'm watching these guys, Tatum multiple times on the same possession, like taking step back threes. Like, what's the mentality that, like, now I'm going to make these 3-pointers and now we're going to win by 40? Like, the mentality should be about closing games. Sometimes I question the mentality of this team. And so that's just my thought. I mean, I just thought it never should have happened. If you take your cushion that you've built successfully and just change tactics and say, now we're going to grind out possessions and we're going to go to the hoop and we're going to get 2s, they win that game easily.
It felt to me that the Celtics played last night like a team that had been suffocated from taking threes against Orlando. And they were playing against a team in New York that they knew they could get threes against this team all night long. And I will say, not every 3 is equal. There were just a ton of open and wide open shots that they missed. So just overall, I would say last night was an anomaly as far as shooting. They missed 4 or 5 layups. They missed a bunch of mid-range looks. They missed a ton of wide open threes. And so I would just say overall, it was an anomaly to me last night as far as their shooting performance. But I just felt like they went into that game, and if you know what they did against the Knicks all year long, they took a ton of threes against the Knicks. They made a ton of threes against the Knicks. They shot at a very high percentage against the Knicks from 3. I think they went in and they felt a little bit of freedom. Wow, we're getting looks, and these guys aren't suffocating us on the 3-point line. And so they went out and they took a number of threes in the first half. And then I think what happened, Greg, and I'm not excusing their performance in the third quarter or their approach, because I agree with you. I think they took literally like 1 2-point shot in the entire third quarter. Just crazy. Just crazy. But what I think is to try to get into the mind of them and what's happening here is, so you're finally getting wide open and open threes. You weren't getting those against Orlando. You know you're a very good 3-point shooting team. You've killed this team all year long at the 3-point line. In the first half, you can't throw it in the ocean. So I think if you go back that third quarter, they actually start pretty hot. I think they made like 4 of their first 9 threes. Mm-hmm. I just fell in love with it. Like, okay, we're getting a ton of great looks from 3. We did not make them in the first half. Now we're making them in the third quarter, and this is going to be an avalanche. And they get up by 20, and it's like, let's continue to do what we're doing because it's working, and we make 3 more threes. This game's a 30-point game, and this thing's over. And we absolutely take away the Knicks' heart. They missed those threes, and they missed those threes again and again. And so they kind of fell back, and the Knicks were allowed to get into transition because of the misses, get some easy buckets. I also just think, look, again, big picture, Derek White and Tatum and Jaylen Brown, I think, shot a combined 21 of 60 from the floor. Look, if that happens again in this series, they'll lose again. I don't think you can count on that happening if you're the Knicks. Porzingis was awful. He's been awful since he's been a Celtic in the playoffs. He had that one great moment in game 1 against Dallas. He's been useless a lot so far in this postseason, including last night before he got sick. Sam Hauser has been useless. In his 4 minutes, he missed 2 wide open threes, gave up a layup on the other end in transition, and then fouled the guy taking a three, OG Anunoby. Like, the Knicks literally went on like a 16-9 run or something with Hauser out. So a lot of things went wrong. And Mazzulla's got to be better. He's very good, but his timeout usage has been weird. All right, let's get into some Patriots. See, I told you I didn't want to get into the Celtics. I get on a tangent. That's your fault. That's your fault. The last 3.5 minutes, blame Greg.
That's me.
All right. Julian Edelman elected to the Patriots Hall of Fame. Your thoughts, Greg?
Look, Julian Edelman is a Patriots Hall of Famer. No question about that. And my comment has nothing to do with him. I hated it. Adam Vinatieri was in line first. He helped create the dynasty, the first dynasty, with everything that came after it. And he should have gone in. There should be a pecking order in terms of, like, it should have been Vinatieri, then it should have been Mankins, then it should have been Edelman. We got a bunch of other people who are going to be eligible coming up here. Gronkowski, Slater, other people like that. Devin McCourty. Look, it's a fan vote. Julian's very popular. He's still in the media, still talking about the Patriots, interviewing a bunch of Patriots people for his podcast and all that stuff. So I understand it. I'm just a little bit disappointed because Vinatieri should have gotten in.
Couldn't agree more. Is Julian Edelman an NFL Hall of Famer?
We've talked about this before. No, absolutely not. I mean, if there was a postseason Hall of Fame, yes. I'm sorry. I mean, he was never, I look a lot at Pro Bowls, and I'm talking about like the first vote, not if you get in. The only one that counts is the initial list. It's very important to at least get Pro Bowls. All pros are huge. I mean, if I was a Hall of Fame voter, that's really the only thing I would look at. Is all pro nods, because that you're looking for the best in their era, and that's sort of the best representative of that to me. Julian, a very good player, never viewed that way around the league as one of the top wide receivers of his time. Certainly a good wide receiver, a very good wide receiver, but no, he is not a Pro Football Hall of Famer to me.
All right, ESPN had their latest power rankings, the post-draft power rankings, and the Patriots were listed at number 23. If you're wondering, they were listed at number 24 after free agency, so they were bumped up one spot due to their draft. When you look at this roster, because that's what a power ranking is, right? They're not talking about strength of schedule. They're not talking about the coaching. They're just looking at the roster right now when it's May. Do you think that's fair to have the Patriots somewhere around 23 or so when you look at the NFL overall?
On first blush, I want to say yes, but I do understand it. And I'm looking through the list right now. So the Patriots are at, what'd you say, 23?
Yeah.
They are ahead of the Colts, the Jaguars, the Raiders, the Panthers. Okay. Who are they behind? The Cardinals. Okay. The Bears. Yeah, I don't know about that. The Dolphins. I don't know about that. So, look, I think I would view them somewhere around 20. You could go up, you could go down. I don't think it's egregious to put them at 23, but I understand it from the viewpoint of there's a lot of unknowns with this team. And there's a lot of, we look at it and we project forward And we see certain things like you're banking on Will Campbell to be, good, at least like league average. They'll figure out left guard. Looks like the offensive line has potential. There's a lot of unknowns at wide receiver. The offensive backfield looks good with, Henderson, the rookie, coming in and adding a speed element. I mean, Stephon Diggs, is he going to come back? What's he going to look like? Or, when is he going to be back? That sort of thing. So, I don't have a huge problem with it because I do think there's a lot of unknowns, projections that maybe we here are taking for granted, where maybe nationally and outside of New England, they're like, well, I mean, I see where they're going on paper, but a lot of things have to go right. And I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that.
I don't think it's egregious in either way, whether it's too low, too high. Right around there feels fair to me. If you're wondering, last May, the Patriots were 30th in the power ranking. So they've jumped 7 spots from last May to this May. So there has been significant improvement just looking at that metric from ESPN. All right, let's jump into the mailbag. W. Jantley, hopefully I pronounced your name correctly. Greg, where do you see the rest of the division after the draft? Of course, we got Dolphins, Jets, Bills. How are you feeling about those 3 teams?
So it was an interesting question, and when I get these mailbags, like these are sort of like my member Q&As, which I do every week, and everybody, all the sports do it every week. I get like in the Patriots one, I get like between like 60 and 80 questions every week. So I don't. It's more of a Q&A than a mailbag, and so I get a question like this, and it's like, all right, if I'm really going to answer this, then it's really more of a story for me to sit down and really go through the rosters. Like on first blush, like I really couldn't answer it, but I figured it'd be a good exercise for you guys. Let's start with the Bills. And, I like what they've done in the draft and free agency. They brought in the big people that they brought in are Joshua Palmer, wide receiver from the Chargers, who liked. Yeah. Elijah Moore. Who knows? Chenault they brought in at wide receiver. I mean, at least they have some people. They got, they brought in Kendrick Green at guard to help on the offensive line, shore that up. Should be a good guy. I think they did a lot of stuff in, they brought in Joey Bosa on defense. Who knows how many games he's going to play because he's hurt all the time. They brought in some, a couple other guys on the defensive line. I really like what they did in the draft. I think getting Maxwell Hairston, the cornerback who's coming back, I think he's the guy who's coming back from injury. We'll see whether he's back, but he's good. They got him in the first round. TJ Sanders, the interior defensive lineman, the defensive tackle, he's really good. And then they got 2 sort of, they also got Deion Walker on the defensive line. Landon Jackson, that's really interesting. If you remember listening to this podcast, that's a name we brought up in the Will Campbell discussion, because I would say of all the games that I watched from Will Campbell last year, Landon Jackson gave him the most trouble, with his length, with his size. So that's a matchup that we could see to come for years in the AFC East. So that's interesting. So I think the Bills only solidified themselves as the favorites in the division. The Dolphins, I think are a big unknown. They did add Zach Wilson as sort of Tua's backup. Is that going to be an upgrade when Tua gets hurt? We shall see. They got the guard that the Patriots were interested, Soyana Anaya. And let's see, what else did they do? They got some bigs on the interior. On defense, Jalen Ramsey is probably going to be traded at some point. The safety is now gone. His name escapes me right now, who was really good for them.
Holland?
Yes, he's gone. So I think there's a lot of, who knows? Tyreek Hill, is he happy? Is he not? Is he going to be there? So I think the Dolphins are a big question mark. And of course the Jets are a big question mark. I mean, they did some nice things in the draft with Membu and Mason Taylor. Tyler Barron in the 5th round was a good pick. Malachi Moore. safety, good player. They brought in Derek Nandi at sort of nose tackle from the Chiefs. He's good. But, of course, their quarterback situation, Justin Fields, Tyrod Taylor. They brought in Josh Reynolds at wide receiver. They brought in Josh Myers from the Packers at center. I think their offensive line is going to be a strength if Membu can play. If those guys can stay healthy, they move Fashanu over to left tackle. So that'll help Breece Hall. But their quarterback situation is extremely iffy. And, they're going through it normally says it right here, but it doesn't. Oh, they're going through, a new head coach, a new GM. Steve Wilkes is the defensive coordinator now. How are those guys going to transition there? I think the Jets, between the Patriots, the Dolphins, and the Jets, there's a bunch of big questions on these teams. And, who's second to the Bills? I think it's completely up for grabs.
Yeah, I would agree with the general assessment. Starting with the Jets, this is somewhat of a reset, but not a full reset because Joe Douglas actually drafted pretty well. I mean, when you look at a lot of these younger players they have, you mentioned the offensive line. You look at Breece Hall, you look at Garrett Wilson, but you got to reset. And a huge question, as you said, at quarterback, Aaron Glenn as a head coach. We'll see if that works out. Dolphins are fascinating. There's been some stuff written about Mike McDaniel maybe losing his handle on that football team. I think he's on the hot seat. So I'm very interested to see how that works down there with McDaniel. Tyreek Hill, as you mentioned, is very volatile, always kind of wondering if he's going to fly off the handle and say something or do something. That Patrick Paul at left tackle is a major question for me. Armstead retired. So, I mean, Paul was not good last year. He was seen as somewhat of a raw prospect coming out in the draft in 24. So they got a huge question mark at left tackle. And as far as the Bills, look, they're the best team in the division, but there are some questions I've got. You need Keon Coleman to step up. He wasn't great last year. He was, the pick that they brought in to help change that offense for Josh Allen. He needs to be much better. James Cook was looking for a contract, has talked a lot about his contract. How is he going to handle that on the field? The Hairston, Benford, Tre'Davious White at cornerback trio, I think, is a good one if White can show you anything. And I do wonder about Damar Hamlin. Look, great story that he came back from what he went through. We all remember it from a couple of years ago. But I don't think he's necessarily a great free safety. So you've got some question marks there with Buffalo, but I don't think anybody would deny they're the best team in the division. All right, before we continue with the mailbag, Greg wants to talk about Prizepicks.
Cash in on the basketball playoffs with Prizepicks. Don't miss your last chance to add your favorite players from the court to your Prizepicks lineup. Whether it's points, rebounds, assists, take your pick of more or less for your shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash today. Turn your playoff hot takes into tickets to basketball's championship series, starting with the play-in round. Every lineup you make on Prizepicks will enter you in the Takes Two Tickets sweepstakes, which could get you an A+1 on a VIP to the ship. And I think the Celtics are going to be there, so all the better for you guys. Prizepicks is the best way to win real money this basketball season. Which players are going off, which ones aren't? Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports takes into real money all season long on Prizepicks. Don't miss your chance to add your favorite players from the ice in your Prizepicks lineup. Whether it's goals, points, or hits, take your pick of more or less for your shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash today. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, that's code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prizepicks, run your game.
Yeah, sweet, meaningless tie for the Bruins at the end of the year. Good job. Good job. You end up with the 7th pick because of the lottery last night. Good work, guys.
It's like the Patriots.
Staring at a top 3 pick. You had a shot at a top 3 pick, and you get the worst possible scenario. Now sitting at 7. Great. Good work. Good work out of all of you. By the way, for those listening, do us a favor. We ask that you subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, tell Greg about how wrong he is. And for those watching the show on CLNS, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the Patriots Press Pass YouTube channel. We can find our show and a lot of other great Patriots content as well. Also, please make sure to turn on the notifications so you know the instant a new video drops. Let's continue with the mailbag, Greg. This is from SZ Schneid 3. Greg, do you see the Patriots as now being set on their offensive line group, or could there be another guy or maybe two brought in as extra competition at left guard or to play left tackle in a pinch if Campbell needs some time?
So, Nick, I don't know how you feel about it, but I think they are largely done at this point. I think that, with the addition of Will Campbell, with the addition of Jarrett Wilson, and also Marcus Bryant, so they got, a left tackle, developmental like right tackle, offensive tackle, and they got a center / guard. I think they're largely done. Now, that doesn't mean at some point, and look, what we're going to see here, starting with, I think we had the rookie camp. We get a look at the rookies and try out guys on Friday. And then I want to say May 20th is the first time we get to see practice. So including mandatory mini camp for the veterans and everyone, we're scheduled to see 6 to 7 practices, because I say I leave one open because, at least in the past, they have sometimes canceled that last one and done like a team building, and we'll have to see what they do. But remember, all of these are in shorts and t-shirts. There's no pads or anything like that. We're not going to see the offensive linemen in pads until like the end of the first week of training camp. Right. So how much can you really gauge what you have on the offensive line, without pads on? I don't think you really can, but I think they're set for now. Should somebody come available? I mean, maybe, but I think they feel pretty good about, they have, as far as starters, Will Campbell. Left guard's a wide open competition between Jared Wilson, Wes Schweitzer, where they brought in Cole Strange, Layden Robinson, Sidney So. At center, you have Bradbury and Ben Brown. Right guard, you have Mike Onwenu, of course. Right tackle, you have Morgan Moses, DeMontre Jacobs, Marcus Bryant, maybe Vidarian Lowe, Caden Wallace. I forgot to mention him. They have plenty on the offensive line right now. So I don't anticipate them adding anybody until, if there's some sort of injury or they get into the camp in the preseason and they're just like, holy crap, let's say we don't have anybody that can play left guard right now. Maybe they make another move, but again, what are you going to be getting? You're going to be getting another sort of tryout level guy, but I think they feel good about, the competition at left guard, and they have plenty of backup swing tackles to compete. I think they're good.
And I don't believe you mentioned Jared Wilson, who was also in the mix here. So, I mean, when you look at this offensive line,
I meant to if I didn't, but I think I did, but I meant to.
Maybe I missed it. But you look at this offensive line. I'm not telling you they're going to be a top 10 offensive line. So everybody take a deep breath. But my goodness, are they so much better off right now than where they were to start this offseason? Campbell, Bradbury, Onwenu, Moses. You've got 4 out of your 5 there. Jared Wilson, I do think, could push Bradbury at center. I think he'll be thrown into the guard mix as well on the left side just to see where he's at. But you should be able to find suitable left guard play out of what you have on this roster between Strange, Robinson, and Schweitzer and So. You should be, and Wilson, if he's part of the mix, you should be able to find a guy who can play average football at left guard. Onwenu is somebody that I don't think a lot of people have talked about this offseason, but I don't want to discount the fact that he's going to be focused on his position finally. Like he is going to be the right guard of this football team. There's no waffling. There's no throwing him back and forth. And if he shows up in shape, I think he's going to be much better to start this season than he was a year ago. So with his play being better, Morgan Moses being an immediate upgrade at right tackle, Will Campbell is an upgrade. Even if he's average to slightly above average, he's an upgrade on Vidarian Lowe. So I just think they're better. And I would agree with you, Greg. I don't think they're going to show too much urgency unless somebody gets released that they don't anticipate getting released. All right, speaking of the offensive line in Will Campbell, with Campbell penciled in to be left tackle, how concerned are you with left guard? Kind of just talked about this, but does When you look at Leighton Robinson would have extra pressure to be assignment assured and solid. Does that give someone like Cole Strange a certain edge? That is from CSM17 CSM. Also mentions with the current coaching staff is a guard like Strange or Robinson the ideal size.
So, look, I would remove any of the preconceived notions about any of these guys. I think you should also eliminate any like who's the ideal X, Y, and Z for this coaching staff. Like that's not the way these coaches look at it. Like we've seen it and just taking it, this is Josh McDaniels' offense. So really he's going to have, not final say, but he's going to have a lot of say in terms of, who's playing where and what he knows, what he has to work with. And so if it's up to Josh McDaniels, like he doesn't care what size the guy is. The Patriots have had all sorts of shapes and sizes that say like left guard that we're talking about, whether it's like Logan Mankins or Dan Connolly or, sometimes you got some Ryan Wendell there. I mean, these guys are all different. The bottom line is who's effective. And look, Leighton Robinson is a kid who they really liked. They liked his potential. The plan was to bring him along slowly as sort of a project and maybe get him ready for year 2, which we're now going into. Because of the crap show that was the offensive line, he got rushed in a little bit more. And, I will say, like, preseason training camp, loved Leighton Robinson. And I still do. I mean, he definitely had his struggles last year. But, in Cole Strange, I think with his athletic ability, should he be able to get that? Again, he's coming back from this patellar knee surgery, which we've seen with Tristan Cassis. We've talked about with, Josh Simmons in the draft. These are tough injuries to come back. And there's this, thread from this doctor on Twitter that I retweeted that, it's basically like a 50-50 proposition if guys come back from this injury compared to like, say, a quadriceps tear. But anyways, not to get in the weeds on that. But, look, am I concerned about left guard? Well, yeah, because I don't know who's starting right now. But like Nick just laid out, they have enough options and enough good players that this is a wide open competition. And I have faith in this new coaching staff, the 3 veteran offensive line coaches, as opposed to the years before. I'm not holding it against Cole Strange and Leighton Robinson and City So about their struggles, because I don't think that they were put in position to succeed. And I think now with these coaches that are here, they have a real shot, and let's throw it open and see what happens on the field. But no, I'm not overly alarmed about left guard. Like Nick just said, they have enough guys that I have faith that they're going to find at least a solid left guard to be plugged in.
And frankly, you could argue this is exactly what they should be doing at left guard, because they invested so much draft capital on the interior offensive line. You should give these guys every chance. City So in 2023 was pretty good. He wasn't great. He was up and down like a lot of rookies are. His pass protection was up and down like a lot of young offensive linemen deal with when they first get into the league. Last year, I think he was set to start at left guard. And you remember those 10 or 11 straight practices, Greg, where they had, I think it was Vidarian Lowe at left tackle, So at left guard, David Andrews at center, Owenu at right guard, and Okorafor at right tackle. That's what they wanted. That's what they wanted, and that's what they were planning on. Now, was it a good plan? Okorafor quit, as we know, a week in, and injuries happen. City So goes down with an injury, and really it derailed his entire season, much like Caden Wallace. But you invested a lot at the guard position, and so see what happens. Antonio Mafi, he's gone. Jake Andrews, he's gone. City So, Leighton Robinson, you felt good enough about those guys to draft them with legitimate draft picks. Give them a shot. Give them a shot and see if one of them can win it out. All right. Before we continue with the mailbag, Greg, talk about Factor for us.
Ready to optimize your nutrition this year? Factor has chef-made gourmet meals that make eating well easy. They're dietitian approved and ready to heat and eat in 2 minutes so you can fuel right and feel great no matter what life throws at you. Factor arrives fresh and fully prepared, perfect for any active, busy lifestyle. Lose up to 8 pounds in 8 weeks with Factor Keto meals based on a randomized, controlled clinical trial with Factor Keto. Results will vary depending on diet and exercise, with 40 options across 8 dietary preferences on the menu each week. It's easy to pick meals tailored to your goals. Choose from your preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto, which is the ones I get. Factor can help you feel your best all day long with wholesome smoothies, breakfast, grab-and-go snacks, and more add-ons. Reach your goals this year with ingredients you can trust and convenience that can't be beat. I totally agree with that. Love the way it comes, the packaging, the freezer packs, everything's fresh. Pop it right into the refrigerator and then pop it right into the microwave. And the sauces, the seasoning, this is no cardboard diet food. Let me tell you that. This is like eating at a restaurant right out of your refrigerator because the seasoning is so good on every single meal that I've tried. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/Bedard50off to use code Bedard50off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code Bedard50off at factormeals.com/Bedard50off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box.
Speaking of Bedard, check him out at BSJ along with Giardi, doing great work on the Patriots. $50 for the year over at Boston Sports Journal. Of course, you got Corrales and Haggerty as well. So check those guys out. $50 for the year. Also, download the Prizepicks app today. Use code CLNS. Get $50 instantly when you play $5. Back to the mailbag. For here men with this question. Greg, how highly regarded is Pop Douglas around the league? I seem to recall you or Mike Giardi saying you were surprised how highly people at the Combine spoke of him.
So I don't remember the Combine thing. That might have been Giardi. I want to say it was also like Phil Perry. I don't really delve into the draft thing. We all knew he was a playmaker. There was a lot of concern about his size and also his durability, which I think have come to fruition. But I mean, we all see the playmaking ability that, you get the ball in space and he makes people miss. I mean, I will say, I think what this reader is referencing is at some point I remember talking to coaches and players from other teams, and basically they were like, Pop Douglas is the only playmaker on this team. He's the only guy like in our meetings that we have any concern about. And that's where I think, the criticisms about this, some of the people in this draft class or where they took them, I think are misguided because you're talking about a team that was devoid of playmakers, and we'll see what Stephon Diggs becomes and where he is at in this part of his career. But, when you're talking about Travion Henderson and you're talking about Kyle Williams, you are talking about these guys have the potential to be playmakers as well that you're adding. Like the Patriots just don't have enough guys that can A, make people miss, B, run away from people. And now you throw those two guys have that potential. And so, I don't know if this reader's trying to get to like, is Pop Douglas trade bait or just what people think of him? They like him. They do think he's a playmaker. I think the Patriots added 2 more potential playmakers, which is huge for them. I don't care where they drafted them. I don't care what position you think they are and what value that is. These guys, the 2 guys they took are playmakers. They needed more of them. And as far as Pop Douglas, there's a lot of respect for him that he can make plays, but small and durability. And we'll see how that plays out.
Let's get to Tony, who calls himself a ball knower. Ball knower Tony. If Joe Milton was a quote-unquote bad dude, wouldn't it have been pertinent to know this while he was still a Patriot? What good is a source if they only want to step forward and slam the player after they are already gone?
So, so I answered this in the member Q&A, and I forget exactly what my answer was, but Tony also didn't like my response to his question. I'm trying to figure out what's going on here with Tony. Like, did he buy a Joe Milton jersey and now he's mad? Like, he definitely sounds pissed off that, maybe he was a huge Joe Milton fan. And like, look, the bottom line is this. First of all, let's just remember that I told people that there were concerns about Joe Milton. There were red flags. It's part of the reason why he fell to the 6th round back after he was drafted. And, let me quote, and this is straight from a AFC personnel executive. he was still on our board, but he was heavy maintenance. This is sort of like a designation where they're just like, how much are they going to have to worry about this person? And, heavy maintenance is probably like right below. We might take this guy off the board for us. So heavy maintenance is not good. Okay. He was still on our board, but he was heavy maintenance. And the main thing was just like the pro approach. He's a partier, or at least he was earlier in his career. Confidence, mental toughness, how he handled losing his job his second year. There were some concerns with that. You just have a big mold of clay. The biggest thing is the maturity of being able to handle that position and being the guy you want. First in the building, last out. Like, how much extra is he willing to do to reach the next level would be the question. But by all accounts, he was a good kid, just immature. It's a concern because he's 24 years old. So let's not pretend that I didn't say anything about Joe Milton. Okay. When you're able to get information. Now, as far as last year goes, number one, and we go through this every year. Number one, it's really hard to get information during a season. Okay. And plus, he was the third string quarterback. So how much was he really on people's radar? And, and like I said last podcast, like, I'm not telling you he's a bad human being. I'm just saying he was a bad dude for the room. Okay. And secondly, they wiped out the coaching staff in like 0.2 seconds as soon as the season was over. And number three, they brought in a new coaching staff where you're just like, all right, well, it wasn't a good situation last year. Maybe these guys come in and say it was unfair to Joe Milton and we really like Joe Milton. Who knows? You just leave it open. But I mean, I just don't understand being butthurt over, getting information about a player. It's really very rarely does anything come out about a player on a team. Nick, I don't know if you can remember. Maybe there's listeners that can remember. Here in New England, in most places, things don't come out during the middle of the season. They're into it, all right? And especially about guys, third-string quarterbacks and practice squad guys, they're barely on the radar. So I don't understand the anger and the tone to all this. I think my reporting was accurate the entire time. Don't say I didn't warn you about Joe Milton. I did as soon as he was drafted. So this shouldn't have come out of nowhere.
High maintenance, and handling losing his job. I think when you look back at those quotes, really stick out to me, and why the Patriots just felt, I think, a little awkward, unsure about Milton and how he was going to adapt to his reality, which is, dude, you're going to be the backup quarterback for this football team. And, there's too much focus. There was too much focus about, how's Drake Maye handling the quarterback room? Is he capable of handling the quarterback room? And why is Drake Maye worried about Joe Milton? I don't think that was the point. The Patriots weren't worried about Drake Maye. I don't think Drake Maye was worried about Drake Maye or Joe Milton. The point was they were concerned about Joe Milton and how he was going to handle things and how he was going to impact the quarterback room. And you can be the most confident guy. You can be sure about yourself and your ability and say, I'm the starting quarterback of this football team, which I'm sure Drake Maye believes with every fiber of his being. He has not given us any hints to say otherwise. It doesn't matter how Drake Maye feels and whether he's super confident and I'm the starting quarterback. Joe Milton could still be a distraction in the room. He could still be a distraction to the work week. And people were so focused, some of them were so focused on Drake Maye. Well, isn't that a problem if he can't handle it? No, you know what? I'm sure Drake can handle it. The Patriots staff just didn't want Joe Milton in the room because they thought he was going to be a major pain in the ass. Period. End of story. That's it. That's what happened. That's how it went. All right. J-Buzz 816. Are you concerned at all that Drake, speaking of Drake Maye, will be overwhelmed by learning a second offense in 2 years, and that it's McDaniels' system, which has been notoriously hard in the past for players to pick up? Are you getting a sense that he's so far been able to work well with Josh and figure things out?
So let me start with this. The reports that I'm getting about Drake Maye and learning this offense and everything, have been very good so far. Very, very smart player and a guy who's putting in the work away from the field, at home, all that stuff. Like, there's no concerns about that. Secondly, I would say stop listening to certain sports talk radio hosts who like to push narratives and, for, topics of discussion and all this stuff. And look, it's not ideal. Like we talked about with Mac Jones, where, we talked about like how to ruin your franchise quarterback 101, that type of thing that basically Bill Belichick just started checking through the checklist. Gerard Mayo had to be pushed out. That coaching staff had to be pushed out. I mean, but do I have any concerns? No. Just look at Josh McDaniels' track record. I mean, just in terms of the guys that he had to get ready in short order. Remember, most of this team, basically outside of like Hunter Henry and, Austin Hooper has some familiarity, Kendrick Bourne. Everybody else is pretty much, probably Ramondre Stevenson. Everybody else is pretty new to this offense. So it's not like the rest of the team are 10 years vets in this offense and Drake Maye is a neophyte. That's basically everybody, especially with the rookies that they added. They're all in the same boat. And just look at what Josh McDaniels did with Cam Newton and Mac Jones. And say what you want about Cam Newton, but especially early on, like he looked pretty good. Remember, there was a lot of talk after I think it was the Seattle game, first 4 or 5 games of the season, about extending Cam Newton. Okay. We all know how the rest of the season went, but in terms of what they were able to do with new quarterbacks and rookie quarterbacks acclimating to the offense, I think they did a really good job. So I think any concerns about the complicated nature of Josh McDaniels' offense, that was more of a Tom Brady thing. This is more of everybody starting on from ground zero, and Josh McDaniels is not going to go. He's not going to go higher than what he thinks these guys can handle, especially the quarterback. So no, I don't have any concerns about that.
I'll tell you, that Cam Seahawks game was a banger. Man, oh man, I was on a high. Mm-hmm. I'll be honest. Yep. If you look at the McDaniel stuff, this goes back to the conversation we had at the time. They were moving on from Alex Van Pelt. That was obvious. And the question then is, do you bring in a young gun? Do you bring in a guy that has aspirations to be a head coach one day, which is everybody in the league or the vast majority of people in the league? Or do you go with Josh McDaniels? And even if there's a little bit of an awkward transition here, the idea is that McDaniels is not going to be a head coach anytime soon. So that was always one of the major reasons why I was a huge proponent of bringing McDaniels in, because he brings you sustainability. He brings you stability. And he's going to have, I would imagine, the offensive coordinator title for as long as he wants it here, as long as the offense is working. So that was the whole idea. So, yeah, 2 offensive coordinators in the first 2 years, not ideal. Nobody wants that to happen. However, if McDaniels goes 5 years and is the OC and Maye's playing well, then you say he had 2 offensive coordinators in his first, 6 years. That feels a lot better, doesn't it? So I think you've got to understand in the short term, there might be a little bit of awkwardness, but in the long term, it is what's best for business. And I know people talk about the pushback to what Greg said about, well, it's a Tom Brady thing. People will point to Davante Adams and saying that the offense is difficult when he was in Vegas. Just look at Davante Adams' numbers, okay? So yeah, as difficult as it was, the dude literally had 2 of his best years. And
Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, so it wasn't too difficult to not go out there and play great football. So he figured it out. Maybe it was just a receiver bitching a little bit, which, many of them do. All right, let's get to B Hill 66. 2 questions. I love this. With all the emphasis on culture, rightfully so, and turning over the roster, why is Jahlani Tavi still on the team? That's question 1.
Okay, so question 1, now he brought up culture. I would say this about Jahlani Tavi, and most of my questioning his place on this team is just his play style and his speed and the emphasis, which it's evident that they want to get faster and more dangerous up front. And Jahlani Tavi, that's not exactly what comes to mind when you think of Jahlani Tavi. Now, I will say Tavi has appeal football-wise because should you need somebody, he can cover a lot of different spots, like a Kyle Van Noy. But again, that's in the old Patriots defense. I still don't think football-wise he fits. Culture-wise, to me, I think Jahlani Tavi has a very high football character. And I think you look at what he's done in his Patriots career so far, and that's the reason why he's been successful and been a good player for them. And he's gone from, a guy that I was criticizing, like, why the heck is he out there, to he's a good football player, at least in the old Patriots system.
Yeah.
What these guys are talking, what B. Hill is talking about, and what sports talk radio callers and sports talk radio hosts, what they're talking about is his comments about the fans last year. And to me, quite frankly, football coaches don't care about that stuff. Now, would ownership say something, see it, and say something to football? Like, we don't want this guy any. Yeah, that's possible. But as far as football coaches only care about football character. And Tavi is very high on that. His comments about the fans and Mayo and stuff like that, that is what it is. But that's a sports talk radio topic. It's not reality when you talk about running a football team.
Second question from B Hill 66. Based on the current linebackers on the roster and the amount of safeties that the Patriots now have, could you envision Duggar or Mapu being moved to linebacker?
Duggar is the only possibility. I mean, I don't see that. They've signed a bunch of guys. I mean, they have at linebacker right now. I mean, it's a little thin. I mean, it depends where you put Jahlani Tavi, but Spillane, Gibbons, Ellis. They might have cut this guy. I also have on my depth chart Monty Rice. He might have just gotten cut. I'm not sure though. Sorry if you weren't cut, Monty, and you're listening to this.
Monty Rice was not cut, so how dare you?
Okay. I know. Sorry. I apologize to Monty Rice.
That's according to our lads. So if our lads is wrong, how dare them?
Right. They're normally spot on. Mapu, I mean, it's possible. It really depends on what he does.
Hold on. I'm done with Mapu. I'm done.
I know.
I don't even want to talk about him. I don't. We're skipping him. I'm sorry. Sorry, Marte. Surprise me, shock me, make me happy somehow, some way. The dude has not been on the field consistently. He's off and on, off and on, off and on. He was hurt at Sacramento State when he was coming out into the draft. Until this dude can get through a camp fully healthy, I'm done. I'm done. You and I talked about Marte Mapu when he was first drafted. We were excited. He's an athlete. Maybe he can play linebacker, sideline to sideline. Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo. I was lactating. The dude can't stay healthy. So, you can't make the club in the tub. And now it's year 3. So the first 2 years you get your shot because you don't give up on a guy. He's been in the league for 2 years. He can't stay healthy until he proves he can. I'm done with the Marte Mapu experiment. I'm sorry. It's probably a little bit too heated and passionate about Marte Mapu, but I'm just tired. Tired about it. Don't want to hear it. Don't want to hear it.
I completely agree. And what I was going to say is, unless he all of a sudden reinvented himself and, now he put on like 25 pounds of muscle and now he's indestructible. I mean, you're talking about playing linebacker or even playing safety. Those are two collision positions. What do we know so far about Marte Mapu? He gets hurt like every other play he's in a game. I mean, literally, there were times last year where he would make a tackle, he would be out for a handful of plays and come back and be on the injury list. Like the dude, you're talking about putting a guy who can't stay healthy at safety at linebacker, going up against offensive tackles and, trying to truck running backs and picking up, going up against blitz pickup and all this stuff. I mean, please. I mean, in theory, could he do it? Yeah, but until he shows that he can actually survive, 1 or 2 NFL games in a row, I mean, what are we talking about here?
All right, let's get out of here with this one. From RM Lavale, I don't know. For multiple seasons, probably since the departure of Edelman, the Patriots have lacked someone who could get open quickly off the line or reliably get open versus man coverage. With the additions of Kyle Williams, Travion Henderson, Stephon Diggs, Mac Hollins, the Pats have that ability again?
In theory, we're talking about 2 rookies. Let's just take Mac Hollins out of this. Mac Hollins is not a get open quickly guy. He's a big dude. He's got a catch radius. He's tough as hell. I love Matt Hollins, but he is not uncovering himself quickly. So that leaves you 2 rookies and a guy coming back from ACL surgery. So, let's just in theory, yes. Henderson, yes. Kyle Williams, definitely. Diggs, definitely. Those guys can get open, quickness. Now, it would be helpful for Diggs. You'll see a lot of highlights of Stephon Diggs with the Houston Texans. You're also talking about, Nico Collins and a bunch of other guys that the team is more worried about. And now Stephon Diggs is working against the 3rd cornerback in the slot, and he's uncovering himself quickly. Is that going to be the case here? I don't know. But, potentially, can Henderson, Williams, and Stephon Diggs get open quickly? Absolutely. But, again, that's potential. We don't know what actually is going to happen.
All right, he's Greg. I'm Nick. Not potentially. We are out of here. We'll talk to you later in the week. Until then, be well.